The first thing Zuri Adami noticed about Seoul was how quiet danger was. Not the loud, obvious kind she grew up respecting in Lagos or even in Chicago. Seoul's danger wore a pressed suit. It arrived in silence, in the way eyes slid away from certain cars, in the way people stopped smiling the moment a black SUV turned onto a street. She noticed all of this and filed it away somewhere in the back of her mind under things she didn't yet understand. But that morning, all she was thinking about was the little girl under the ginkgo tree. The schoolyard of Seoul International Academy buzzed with the organized chaos of recess. Children shrieked and chased each other across manicured grass, their designer sneakers flashing in the pale autumn sun. Zuri stood by the classroom door, coffee in hand, watching, the way she always watched, taking inventory of every child like a teacher cataloging her world. Except for one. She sat alone beneath the wide, golden arms of a ginkgo tree at the far edge of the yard. 6 years old, maybe 7. Tiny in a stiff navy uniform that looked pressed by someone who cared more about appearances than comfort. Her dark hair was pulled into 2 perfect knots on either side of her head. Her hands rested in her lap, and she was staring, not at the other children, not at the sky, but at the iron gates of the school. Staring at them with the kind of concentration usually reserved for something precious or something feared. Zuri had been teaching for 4 years. She knew the difference between a shy child and a sad one. She grabbed a juice box from the snack basket and walked over. "Can I sit with you?" The girl's head snapped up. Her eyes, dark, wide, and startlingly alert, swept over Zuri with the calculating gaze of a child who had learned early that adults were not always safe. "You're new," the girl said. It wasn't a question. "I am." Zuri lowered herself onto the grass, not bothering to worry about her skirt. "I'm Ms. Zuri. I teach the 2nd grade English class. And you are?" "Mina." "Just Mina." A pause, then very quietly, "Kang Mina." Zuri held out the juice box. Mina looked at it, then at Zuri, then back at the juice box like she was being offered something she couldn't quite trust. "You shouldn't sit here," Mina said finally. "My father says people who sit too close to me get hurt." Zuri blinked. Then she laughed, the full, warm kind that always made her students relax because it was so genuine it couldn't possibly be performed. "Well," she said, taking the juice box and poking the straw through herself before handing it back, "your father hasn't met me yet." Something moved in Mina's eyes. Not quite a smile, but something close to it. "I like your hair," Mina said, studying Zuri's thick box braids with their gold cuffs, falling past her shoulders in a cascade of dark brown and copper. "Thank you, I did them myself." Zuri tilted her head. "What do you like to draw?" Mina's hand moved to the small sketchpad tucked beside her knee. She hesitated, then opened it. On the page was a detailed drawing surprisingly sophisticated for a 6-year-old of a tall man in a dark suit. Beside him, 2 smaller figures in suits. The man in the center had no face, just a silhouette. "Men in suits," Mina said simply. Zuri looked at the drawing. She kept her voice easy and light. "Do they have names?" Mina pointed at the faceless man in the center. "That's Appa." It was the first time Zuri felt the cold. If you're already hooked, hit that like button. This story is just getting started. 3:15 arrived the way endings always do in stories like this, quietly, and then all at once. The other parents had already gathered at the gates. They came in clusters, exchanging the polished small talk of people who had earned their way into each other's orbit. Nannies, drivers, the occasional father with a loosened tie. Normal pickup energy. Zuri had Mina's hand in hers. The girl had migrated to her classroom after lunch and hadn't left, and they were finishing the last of a rice cracker snack when the atmosphere outside shifted. Not loudly, not with any announcement. Just a silence moved through the crowd like a cold front. Parents stepped aside. Mothers pulled their children close without seeming to realize they were doing it. 3 black SUVs slid to the curb, and the air itself seemed to thin. Zuri felt it even from the doorway. The man who stepped out of the lead vehicle first was enormous, not in a soft way, in the way of something built for a specific purpose. Dark suit, gold pin, hands that could have palmed a basketball. He walked like the ground had an agreement with him. His eyes swept the yard once, landed on Mina, and he moved. Zuri stepped forward. "Excuse me." The man stopped. Something in his expression suggested this had never happened to him before. "She hasn't finished her snack," Zuri said pleasantly. "And you didn't check in at the front office or show me any ID. School policy is that children are only released to verified guardians." The silence around them deepened so aggressively that Zuri could hear her own heartbeat. The man, she would later learn his name was Jae-hoon, the consigliere, a title that meant nothing to her yet, stared at her with the expression of a person encountering a species they thought was extinct. "You will step aside," he said. His English was perfect and absolutely cold. "I will not," Zuri said, same temperature. "Not until I see ID." Behind her, she felt Mina's hand tighten around two of her fingers. The back door of the lead SUV opened. Zuri didn't turn around immediately. She watched Jae-hoon's face and saw the exact moment his entire demeanor rearranged itself. Whatever authority he carried rearranged too, folding itself into something smaller and more careful. He stepped back. She turned. The man standing by the car was not what she expected. She had expected someone older, someone who looked the part of whatever part was being played here. She had not expected someone who looked like that, tall, sharp-jawed, dressed in charcoal that had clearly been cut for his exact body. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead in a way that was probably studied. Tattoos crept from his shirt cuffs over the backs of his hands, not the chaotic kind, but deliberate lines and symbols like calligraphy written on skin. Kang-di was, objectively, the most terrifyingly handsome person Zuri had ever seen in her life. She kept her expression absolutely neutral. He walked toward her slowly, the way a man walks when he's used to spaces adjusting for his presence. He stopped 3 feet away. His eyes moved to Mina first, something quick and thorough, cataloging that she was whole and unharmed. Then they moved to Zuri. "You stopped my man," he said. His voice was low, soul-accented English, each word deliberate. "I stopped a large stranger from taking a child without identification," Zuri said. "Which is what I'm supposed to do." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, and this was the thing she would think about later, lying awake in her small Mapo apartment replaying it, he almost smiled. "Appa," Mina said from behind Zuri's elbow. She said it the way children say a parent's name, not asking for anything, just confirming they exist. Kang-di crouched. In one motion he was at Mina's level, and his entire face changed in a way that Zuri would never quite have words for, like watching a locked room open. He said something in Korean, low and soft, and Mina answered him, gesturing towards Zuri. His eyes came back up. "She says you sat with her today," he said. "I did." He looked at her the way people look at things they don't quite understand yet. Then he straightened, buttoned his jacket, and said, "You will come to dinner tomorrow. We will discuss Mina's progress." It was not an invitation. Zuri understood that immediately. "I have a name," she said, "Ms. Adami, and I'll be there at 7. This time he did smile. It was slight, barely there, and somehow more unsettling than everything else that had just happened. "Subscribe so you don't miss what happens at that dinner. Trust me, you'll want to be there." The restaurant had no other customers. Zuri realized this when she stepped in and heard nothing. Not the murmur of other tables, not the distant percussion of a kitchen in full swing. Just soft jazz, candlelight, and an entire high-end restaurant that had apparently been emptied and reserved for 2 people, and a conversation about a first grader's reading level. She sat down across from Kang-di, placed her bag on the chair beside her, and said, You bought out the restaurant. I own the restaurant, he said, pouring her tea like that resolved anything. Zuri picked up the tea. Mina is bright, she said. She's reading 2 levels above her grade. She loves drawing. She has strong spatial reasoning. She paused. She also eats alone every day. She hasn't made a single friend in 3 months at the school, and yesterday she told me that people who get close to her get hurt. She's 6, Mr. Kang. What has she seen that made her believe that? The space between them changed. Kang Di set down his tea. He looked at the tablecloth for exactly 3 seconds, she counted, before looking back at her. You know who I am. I Googled you when I got home yesterday. You have a very interesting Wikipedia page for someone whose name officially doesn't appear on any corporate registration. And you came anyway. She needs someone in her corner who isn't afraid of her father. The bravest thing I can do for that child is show her that. He was quiet. She noticed he was very good at quiet, the kind that was listening rather than waiting. Her mother, he said finally, is gone, 3 years ago, a message from people who wanted to send one. He said it with no performance, no emotion visible on the surface, which somehow made it more devastating. The coldness you see around Mina is not indifference. It is the only armor I know how to build. Zuri looked at him for a long time. Armor that isolates her isn't protection. It's a different kind of prison. Something moved across his face, quick, like a flinch he'd learned to suppress. I want to hire you, he said. Private tutor, guardian. You would be with her at the estate on weekday afternoons and whenever I travel. The salary, he slid a paper across the table. Zuri looked at the number, looked at it for a very long time. It would pay off her student loans. Twice. She thought about her mother's voice on the phone last month, asking delicately how things were going financially, in that particular Nigerian mother way that was really asking, are you struggling, because you can always come home. I have conditions, she said. Name them. She gets to choose what we study. She gets real friends, not curated security-cleared playdate candidates. And nobody, not Jae-hoon, not your driver, not you, hovers while I'm teaching. She needs one space in her life that isn't surveilled. Kang Di considered her for such a long time that she thought he was going to say no. Agreed, he said. She didn't shake his hand. She raised her teacup instead. He looked at it, then raised his. They drank. It was the strangest deal she had ever made, and the most certain she had ever felt about anything. The estate was the size of something that should have been on a historical register. Glass and stone and clean architectural lines set into a hill above the Han River, guarded by a perimeter that Zuri had slowly mapped in her first 2 weeks without trying to be obvious about it. She had traded her teacher flats for the ankle boots Kang Di's personal shopper had appeared with one morning. Mr. Kang says the marble floors are slippery, Ms. Adami. And she had mostly ignored the designer wardrobe because it made her feel like she was becoming someone's idea of a person rather than herself. She kept her braids. She kept her nose rings. She kept her jollof rice in his impeccably stainless steel kitchen. And the first time the smell of it moved through the house, Mina followed it like a thread. What is that? Dinner, come here and stir this. Kang Di appeared in the kitchen doorway at 7 o'clock that evening and stopped. Mina was standing on a step stool at the stove, stirring rice with the focused gravity of someone performing surgery. Zuri was beside her, singing softly, a Yoruba children's song her grandmother used to sing, and Mina was trying to hum along to words she didn't know, stumbling over the syllables and laughing when she got them wrong. Kang Di stood in the doorway for a long time before either of them noticed him. When Mina finally looked up, she said, Appa, Ms. Zuri is teaching me a song. It means come and eat before it gets cold. She was beaming. Kang Di looked at his daughter, then at Zuri. He said nothing, but he walked to the table and sat down. And he stayed for dinner. The days had a rhythm now. Morning, school. Afternoon, the estate. Mina drew less in sketchbooks and more on large papers Yuri had taped to the playroom wall. She drew animals and queens and maps of imaginary countries. She started asking questions about Nigeria, about America, about why some words in English made no logical sense and Yuri had to honestly agree. She started laughing more. She stopped watching the gates. Kangdi watched all of it from the perimeter of rooms, like a man who was afraid that stepping fully into the warmth might extinguish it. One evening, he came to the doorway of the study, where Yuri was helping Mina practice her English sentences, and he stood there so long that Yuri finally looked up. "She laughed today," he said. "At breakfast, I haven't heard that since." He stopped. Yuri kept her voice steady. "She laughs a lot now, she's a funny kid. You'd know that if you ate breakfast with her more than twice a week." He absorbed the criticism without flinching. "You are not afraid to say difficult things to me. You're not paying me to be afraid of you. Most people are afraid of me for free." "I noticed," she capped her pen. "Does that ever get lonely?" The question sat in the air between them, unexpected enough that he had no prepared response for it. It was the most unguarded she had ever seen him. 3 full seconds where Kangdi, the shadow king of Seoul, looked like just a man who was very tired and very alone. "Yes," he said, "just that." Then he walked away. Yuri sat in the quiet of the study and tried not to feel the specific quality of that word pressing against her chest. Drop a comment if you felt that, and stay with me because it's all about to break open. The alarm came at 9:47 on a Wednesday. Not the soft residential kind. The estate's security system had its own frequency, a sound that didn't panic but absolutely commanded. The lights shifted to a low red. Somewhere below, she heard running feet and the clipped bark of Jae-hoon's voice issuing orders in rapid Korean. Yuri was already off the couch. Mina appeared in the doorway of the adjacent room, eyes wide but not yet crying, clutching her sketchbook. She had grown up around alarms. She knew this was not a drill. "Miss Yuri." "I'm here." Yuri crossed the room and crouched in front of her. "I need you to be my helper right now, okay? We are going on an adventure. Remember the story about Queen Mormy?" Mina's breath hitched. "The brave queen from the Oyo Empire." "That's right. Queen Mormy walked into danger to protect her people. We're going to do exactly what she would do, smart, fast, and calm." Yuri took her hand. "Can you be Mormy with me right now?" Mina straightened, her chin came up. "Yes." Yuri had memorized the panic room locations in her first week, not because she was told to, but because she was the kind of person who located emergency exits on airplanes and noted which windows opened in hotel rooms. She moved through the dark corridor with Mina's hand locked in hers, keeping her voice steady, narrating. Queen Mormy knew the palace better than anyone. She knew every corridor, every hidden door. She pressed the panel behind the library bookshelf and felt it give. Every secret passage. The room behind it was reinforced steel, climate-controlled, stocked. She got Mina inside, sealed the door, and breathed. "Is Appa okay?" Mina asked. "Your Appa is the scariest man in Seoul. He is absolutely fine." Yuri sat on the floor and pulled Mina down beside her. "Now, do you want to hear the rest of Queen Mormy's story?" "Yes." "Good, because she doesn't just survive, she wins." She kept talking, even when she could hear things on the other side of the walls that she made sure her voice was louder than. She kept talking, kept weaving the story, kept Mina's eyes on her face rather than on the door. She was 29 years old, a teacher from Chicago by way of Lagos, sitting in a bulletproof room in a Seoul hillside mansion telling an ancient story about a queen, and she had never in her life felt more precisely like herself. The door opened 22 minutes later. Kangdi stood in the frame, and Yuri had never seen him like this. Jacket gone, shirt partially open, a cut across his jaw that was going to need attention, his eyes doing the desperate silent math of a father counting his child's fingers and toes. Mina launched herself at him. He caught her and held her with both arms in a way that said he was not planning to let go for a while. Over her head, his eyes found Zuri. She was still sitting on the floor, back against the wall, hands steadier than they should have been given the adrenaline still singing in her blood. There was a small cut on her arm from where she'd caught the door frame in the dark. She hadn't mentioned it to Mina. Kang Dee's eyes found that cut immediately. "Who did this to you?" "A doorframe, I'm fine." He crossed the room in 3 steps, and before she could protest, he was crouching in front of her the way he had once crouched in front of Mina, down to her level, eye to eye. He took her arm with a careful precision that was entirely at odds with his reputation, turning it to look at the cut in the light. "It needs cleaning." "I know, I'm a grown woman, I'll clean it." "Zuri." Her name in his mouth, not Ms. Adami, just her name with a weight on it that suggested it cost him something to say it like that. She looked at him. "You stayed," he said, very quietly. "You could have used the outer exit. I know you found it, I watched the camera footage from your first week. You knew the way out and you chose to stay with her." "She's my student." "She is." He didn't release her arm. "She is also becoming something more than that to me, and so are you. And I am." He stopped, and she watched him navigate some internal architecture that didn't have good words in any language. "I am unused to that." The silence between them was the full kind, not empty, full. "Then get used to it," Zuri said. He lifted her hand. He pressed his lips to the back of it, not performative, not dramatic. Like a man making a vow he'd been circling for weeks, finally said aloud. "You are under my personal protection now," he said. "Not as an employee, not as a guest. Do you understand what I am saying?" Zuri held his gaze. "I understand, but just so we're clear, I don't need protecting. I need to be treated like a partner." Something in his face broke open in the best possible way. "Yes," he said, "that is what I mean." From across the room, Mina's voice was soft, certain, satisfied. "Good." They both looked at her. She was sitting on the reinforced steel bench with her sketchbook open, drawing. When they looked over, she turned the pad to show them 3 figures, rough but unmistakable. A tall man in a suit, a woman with long braids, a small girl between them, all of them facing forward, none of them looking at the gate. This time, the man in the center had a face. But here is the thing about the Shadow King of Seoul, and the woman who walked into his world without trembling. The rivals who sent the message that night. They sent it because they'd learned something. Something that Kang Dee himself didn't know yet. Something that Zuri, sitting on the floor of a panic room telling a story about a queen, had no way of knowing either. The tracker Zuri had found clipped under Mina's school bag 3 weeks ago. The one she'd quietly handed to Jae-hoon. The one they had assumed was placed by a rival, had not come from outside. It had come from inside the estate. And it had been placed there the week Zuri arrived. The question was not who wanted to hurt Kang Dee. The question was who had been watching to see what, or who, he would finally let himself love. And whether that person was still in the house. Subscribe, like, and drop a crown in the comments if you want part 2. Because Zuri Adami didn't survive one night in the Shadow King's world. She's about to become the reason it changes forever.